If you've been watching the news from the US in recent weeks, you'll know there's been a little spat brewing between the US and China that's resulting in a tit-for-tat ratcheting up of tariff threats that could have dramatic economic impacts for both countries. And yes, while today's episode will touch on politics, my aim is to leave my own personal political opinions behind and instead focus on the knock-on effects of the so-called US-China trade war. You see, both the US tariffs and Chinese tariffs could have a dramatic impact on the auto industry, specifically the plug-in car industry and Tesla in particular. Why? Well, not only are the initial 25% import tariffs in the US on steel and aluminium going to increase the cost of producing every new car by as much as $300 per car, meaning Tesla or any other automaker has to choose between swallowing the cost of increases or passing it on to their customers. But China's threatened import taxes on US-made cars could make things even worse. Historically, China has put a 25% import tax on all US-made cars, but in retaliation for the new steel and aluminium tariffs, China says it will increase that tax to 50%. The result? Tesla will either have to dramatically lower its Chinese profits or ask its Chinese customers to pay a lot more to get behind the wheel of a Tesla. Even though there's been an historical import duty on US-made cars entering China, many larger automakers have got around import tariffs by working with local Chinese-based automakers, founding a new joint company that produces vehicles under license in China for the local market. That way, not only is the car company classed as local, but it also helps the Western automaker in question avoid handing off part of their primary company to the Chinese government. Another complicated regulation in China that can cause problems for Western companies. Tesla, at the moment, doesn't have such a partnership. It's classed as a foreign company and thus is subject to all the import duties imposed on foreign cars coming into China. Given that around 15,000 Teslas ended up in China last year, and around 17% of Tesla's revenue comes from Chinese customers, this spat between the US and China could be very bad for Tesla indeed, especially given how hard Tesla is pushing itself in terms of financial commitment and production goals. But while China is a big market for Tesla, it's certainly not a market dominated by Tesla. Last year alone, more than 627,000 battery electric vehicles were sold in the country. It doesn't take a very accomplished mathematician to figure out that Tesla's part in that was a tiny drop in the ocean, representing sales to wealthy, middle and upper class customers rather than regular car buyers. The latter, of course, were more likely to buy Chinese branded vehicles, which sold for far less than any Tesla could. By now, I bet that you're sitting there thinking, yes, but Chinese cars aren't any good and Tesla is only set to expand its market. But you'd be wrong. China's automotive market is where Japanese brands were 30 years ago and when South Korean brands were 10 to 15 years ago. And just as those brands grew and improved, leading to massive market gains around the world, so too are Chinese firms poised to take over the mainstream automotive market. And with plenty of Tesla wannabe firms with connections to China, it's likely we'll see companies like Byton, NIO, and yes, even Faraday Future gain when Tesla loses out. There's another issue with this ongoing trade war too, the massive control of lithium supplies and rare earth metals that China has. Aside from having some large natural deposits within its borders to use, China and Chinese automakers have been working very hard to buy up and secure as large a supply of raw materials for lithium-ion batteries and electric motors as possible. And if Chinese imports aren't welcomed in the US due to import tariffs, then there are plenty of other markets where they will be welcomed, especially if they can undercut US companies in the process. In short, the tariffs planned against China by the US could, and most probably will, backfire badly against Tesla and other US companies. Meanwhile, China, whose government is in the midst of a massive push to encourage its citizens to switch to electric transport, is more than happy to allow domestic electric vehicle markets to grow, flourish, and get ready for world dominance, while Tesla and other companies struggle to deal with the effects of these massive tariffs. So, in 10 years' time, if you happen to be driving a Chinese-branded electric car, you might have the current US president to thank for it. That's it. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.